When I got home that night, as my wife served dinner, I held her hands and said, "I've got something to tell you." She sat down and ate quietly. Again, I observed the hurt in her eyes. Suddenly, I didn't know how to open my mouth, but I had to let her know what I was thinking. "I want a divorce." I raised the topic calmly. Strangely, she didn't seem to be annoyed by my words. Instead, she asked me softly, "Why?" I avoided her question. This made her angry. She threw away the chopsticks that she was holding and shouted at me, "You are not a man!" That night, we didn't talk to each other. She was weeping. I knew she wanted to find out what had happened to our marriage, but I could hardly give her a satisfactory answer. She had lost my heart to Jane. I didn't love her anymore. I just pitied her. With a deep sense of guilt, I drafted a divorce agreement which stated that she could own our house, our car, and 30% stake of my company. She glanced at it and then tore it to pieces. The woman who had spent 10 years of her life with me had become a stranger. I felt sorry for her. I felt sorry for her wasted time, resources, efforts, and moreover her feelings. But I could not take back what I had said, for I loved Jane so dearly. Finally, she cried loudly in front of me, which was what I had expected to see. To me, her cry was actually a kind of release. The idea of divorce, which had obsessed me for several weeks, seemed to be firmer and clearer now. The very next day, I came back home very late and found her writing something at the table. I didn't have supper, but went straight to sleep and fell asleep quickly because I was so tired after an eventful day with Jane. When I woke up, she was still there at the table, writing. I did not care, so I turned over and was asleep again. In the morning, she presented her divorce conditions. She didn't want anything from me, but needed a month's notice before the divorce. She requested that in that 1 month, we both try to live a life as normal as possible. Her reasons for these conditions were simple. Our son had his exams in a month's time, and she didn't want to disrupt him with our broken marriage. This was agreeable to me, but she had something more. She asked me to recall how I had carried her into our bridal room on our wedding day. She requested that every day, for the month's duration, I carry her out of our bedroom to the front door every morning. I thought she was going crazy. Just to make our last days bearable, I accepted her odd request. I told Jane about my wife's divorce conditions. She laughed loudly and thought it was absurd. "No matter what tricks she applies, she has to face a divorce," she said scornfully. My wife and I hadn't had any body contact since my divorce intention was explicitly expressed. So, when I carried her out on the first day, we both appeared clumsy. Our son clapped behind us. "Yay! Dad is holding Mummy in his arms!" She closed her eyes and said softly, "Don't tell our son about the divorce." I nodded, feeling somewhat upset. I put her down outside the door. She went to wait for the bus to go to her workplace, and I drove alone to the office. On the second day, both of us acted much more easily. She leaned on my chest. I could smell her fragrance of her blouse. I realized that I hadn't looked at this woman carefully for a long time. I realized she was not young anymore. Fine wrinkles marked her face, and her hair was graying. Our marriage had taken its toll on her. For a moment, I wondered what I had done to her. On the fourth day, when I lifted her up, I felt a sense of intimacy returning. This was the woman who had given me 10 years of her life. On the fifth and sixth day, I realized that our sense of intimacy was growing again. I didn't tell Jane about this. It became easier to me to carry her as the months slipped by. Perhaps the everyday workout made me stronger. She was choosing what to wear one morning. She tried on quite a few dresses, but could not find a suitable one. Then she sighed. All my dresses have grown bigger. I suddenly realized that she had become so thin. That was the reason why I could carry her more easily. Suddenly, inexplicable feelings hit me. I felt incredibly guilty and sad. She had buried so much pain and bitterness in her heart. Subconsciously, I reached out and touched her head. At the same moment, our son came in and said, "Daddy, it's time to carry Mommy out." To him, seeing his daddy carrying his mummy out had become an essential part of his life. My wife gestured to our son to come closer and hug him tightly. I turned my face away because I was afraid that I might change my mind at this last minute. I then held her in my arms, walking from the bedroom through the sitting room to the halfway. Her hands surrounded my neck softly and naturally. I held her body tightly. It was just like our wedding day. But her much lighter weight made me sad and worried. On the last day, when I held her in my arms, I could hardly move a step. There was a big dilemma in my head, and I thought, I really cannot leave her. I really cannot. Our son had gone to school. I held her tightly and admitted, I had noticed, darling, that our married life was lacking of intimacy. I spent my very last moments with her, cuddling, hugging, kissing, and reminiscing about the memories we shared together. I regret treating her that way so much. I wish I could have been a better husband, never made her sad, and never gone with Jane. I decided to not go to the office, but to Jane's house instead. I thought I had to tell her immediately that I no longer wanted the divorce. I swiftly jumped out of the car without locking the door. I was afraid that any delay would lead me to change my mind. I walked upstairs, knocked on the door, and when Jane opened it, I immediately said, "Sorry, Jane, I do not want a divorce anymore." She looked at me, shocked, and then touched my forehead. "Do you have a fever?" she asked. I moved her hand off my head and said, "Sorry, Jane. I am so sorry. I will not divorce my wife." Our married life was off, most likely because my wife and I didn't value and appreciate the little moments of being together. That is the reason we are lacking intimacy, not because we don't love each other anymore. Now I realize that from the moment I carried her into our home on our wedding day, I am supposed to hold her until death do us part. Jane suddenly seemed to realize that I was serious. She gave me a hard slap in the face, slammed the door, and burst into tears. While I felt sorry for her, I believed this was the right decision. I walked downstairs and I drove away. On the way home, I ordered a bouquet of flowers for my wife. When the salesgirl asked what to write on the card, I smiled and asked her to write, "I'll carry you out every morning until death do us part." A moment later, I got home with flowers in my hands and a smile on my face. I called her, but there wasn't any response. I was looking around the house while calling her and thinking that she might not be home until I found her in her bed. I called her, but she seemed to be asleep. I came closer, but suddenly I felt thick, ominous feelings. I thought to myself, no way it happened, no way that she's dead. I touched her hands, but her pulse had ceased. Tears streamed down my face, and mixed feelings filled my mind. My heart broke as I kept calling her name, trying to wake her up, but it was futile. Regret overwhelmed me, and I wished I could change everything. Later on, my brother-in-law told me that my wife had been fighting cancer for months. She kept it a secret because she didn't want me to worry about her. He also explained that she did it out of love, not wanting me to be sad, because unfortunately, her cancer was spreading rapidly. She knew she didn't have much time left and wanted to shield me from any negative reaction from our son due to my selfish desire for a divorce. All that she hoped for was that our son would continue to see me as a loving and faithful husband